Utah, Penn State. Again, see, if this was Exhibit A, if LSU Purdue was Exhibit A of why I'm for the expanded playoff, this is Exhibit B because this would have been like a playoff. This would have been like a playoff game.
Yep. Yep. For
Like this
sure.
could have been a first round playoff game. And what an awesome game that would have been. For me, I'm 1000% tuning into that as a playoff game. I mean, I'll watch it anyway because I'm a football junkie, but like I would have been juiced for this as a playoff game. I mean, am I wrong about that? That just seems like a great game.
Yeah, no, it definitely would be. And like you said, I'm still excited for it. But yeah, if this had playoff implications, these two teams at full strength would have been excellent.
Yeah, and so look, it's not like this isn't Tennessee Clemson. There are going to be some guys in this game, but Porter Jr. out for Penn State, Clark Phillips out for Utah. So the two, elite potential first round corners out. Parker Washington out, Dalton Kincaid out. He's had injury issues though throughout the season, so they're down some guys. Utah's got some injuries. But still a pretty good matchup on paper. It looks like Brenton Strange is headed to the NFL, Penn State tight end, but says he's playing. So, we'll see if that holds true here in the next few days. So here's a question I hate asking that we won't have to really talk about if this was a playoff game. Who is the more motivated team here? Like who wants to be there? And then who, because Utah was in the Rose Bowl last year against Ohio State, and that was a big deal for them. Is it not as big of a deal this year? Is it a bigger deal because they lost a close game to Ohio State? Like, kind of how do we kind of weigh who wants to be there in this one?
I think this is probably one of the more even matchups in terms of motivation to be there. I mean, I think I would maybe give a slight edge to Penn State just because if Penn State can end this season and say our only two losses were to two playoff teams, like I think that says a lot. And especially, a coach in James Franklin, who a lot of people have thought maybe on the hot seat in recent years, like to have a season like this and finish with just two losses to two playoff teams, I think would be huge. I think Sean Clifford has a lot to play for, from a legacy standpoint, sealing his legacy at Penn State. But I mean, I do think, Kyle Whittingham's a great coach. He doesn't strike me as the type of coach that's going to, mail one in here. So I think it's going to be pretty even. I think I would maybe give the slight edge to Penn State, though.
It is interesting. And I get your point on that. I think with Utah, they're right. They just feel like they're right on the cusp of like being like that top 10 program, like legitimate, like every year, not the like feel good. Oh, here's Utah again, overachieving, but like legitimately becoming like one of the 10 top programs in college football. And I think, they beat USC again to get here. If they could beat Penn State too, I just think, I think it legitimizes everything that Kyle Whittingham's been building here over the years. And this is another these are two programs here that, again, moving from 4 to 12 teams, Penn State's going to be in that thing almost every year.
Yep.
At that point, instead of being out of it like constantly, that's a team. I don't have like the data right in front of me, so I can't say this like with 100% certainty. But I bet if we went back since the 4-teamer started, that if this was like if 5 through 12 got in, I'm willing to wager Penn State is, if not right at the top, very close to the top of the list of schools who would have gotten the most playoff appearances added to what their actual total has been. I would venture to guess very few teams, if any, have finished between 5 and 12 more often than Penn State. Last,
for sure. I mean, they've got two huge roadblocks in their way in their division every year. I mean, that's just a tough ask, but I mean, they've been a consistently really good program, definitely in that top 12 range.
So can Penn State muster enough offense in this one? Parker Washington being out is not a nothing by any stretch. It's good for them. Brenton Strange is playing. Utah's defense, not nearly as good this year as it was last year. Phillips out. what's your kind of thought here on prediction? Winner, score type prediction on this game.
Yeah, I think Penn State's going to win. I was just looking at my ratings here. I've got Penn State as the number 8 offense. Again, they're going to be missing Parker Washington for sure. But I've got Utah as the number 12 defense. So that's going to be a really intriguing matchup on that side of the ball. But I do think I make Penn State a 2.5 point favorite. The line is Utah minus 2.5. I don't think losing Parker Washington and Joey Porter Jr. accounts for 5 points to the spread, especially when you consider that Clark Phillips and Dalton Kincaid are out. And I also, now that I'm thinking through this, I also think running back Tavion Thomas is out for Utah as well. So So I think Penn State's gonna win this. I mean, I have a lot of respect for Utah as a program and watching what they did to USC twice this year, but especially in that Pac-12 championship. Watching that game intently, obviously, I have a lot of respect for them. But I think Penn State's gonna win this game.
I think I'm going the other way. I think I've got Utah. It's gonna be. I'd be shocked if this isn't like a 1-score game either way.
Yep.
I can't get the Penn State's a weird team this year. So their 2 losses are respectable. They played Ohio State very tough at home. I didn't think the Michigan game was very competitive. I mean, the score said it was in the first half, but it
was it was very fluky.
Yeah. And then you look past that, and then the rest of their schedule is not great. Now, they beat the hell out of Auburn at Auburn, but a lot of SEC teams did that this year. But they did that. They dominated Auburn as much as any of the SEC powers did. So for me, they're a tough read. It's really hard. This is almost like a tiebreaker game for Penn State. Like you could argue that Penn State is a top 7 or 8 team. Look, they've only got lost to these 2. Their only 2 losses are to CFP teams, and they played one of them really tough. And you could also go the other way and say, well, they're also maybe one of the more overrated teams because hey, they didn't beat anybody. they the 2 good teams on their schedule, they lost, and one of them wasn't competitive. And so I think this is kind of the difference maker on Penn State's season. Was this a really good team that just ran into 2 great teams, or is this just a kind of an above average team that ran into 10 not so good teams and lost to the 2? And I kind of thought Penn State was underranked throughout the rankings process, but I've become a pretty big fan of this Utah team. There's something about them. I think they're going to pull this one out by field goal. I'll say like 31-28 sounds about right to me.
I can see it.
I think it's going to be a physical game. I think both these teams do like to get pretty physical. They like to run the football. They like to Again, I didn't think Utah's defense was as dynamic this year as it was last year. They lose Devin Lloyd, and just I felt like there were games where Utah was kind of just hanging on. Both those USC games were high scoring, especially that first one. So it'll be interesting. I think both teams can get close to 30, but I think Utah's going to pull this off. I just think last year was like they were so close with Ohio State, and I just think this is a team that feels like they have to get over this hump. But we'll see.